All right, we're going to pick up where we left off on Friday, or on Thursday actually, sorry. So this is exactly like the one we just did. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my P's and Q's. There's P. I have a 1 for Q. Let's find the factors of negative 20. See, that's going to be plus and minus 1, plus and minus 2, plus and minus 4, and plus and minus 5. Then 10 and 20. That's our first step. Find the factors of Q. In this case, it's just a plus or minus 1. So P over Q equals plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 10, and plus or minus 20. This isn't going far enough. Now I have to do my synthetic division. If you remember everything that we've learned so far, we need to go back and do our synthetic division. Remember, I'm going to have 4 roots from the fundamental theorem of algebra, which says that the highest amount of roots, or the exact number of roots that I can have, is 4 because my highest exponent is 4. So let's go to Desmos to find our first. So just typing this in now. Plus 16x minus 20. Now, some of you on your homework put Desmos is your solution for all of the answers. You are only allowed to use Desmos to find your first few. And now that we're handling roots that are complex, we're only going to have 2 roots show up out of 4. So I'm going to start with 1 because it's going to be my easiest division. You have to do synthetic division. That was the other thing that I saw in the homeworks. A lot of people didn't do synthetic division at all. Again, if you don't do it, that's fine. You just don't get credit. Also, while we're on the topic of this, my video watches have increased. However, I can still look at my YouTube analytics, and only 8% of people make it past the first 10 minutes, which means that nobody's watching the whole videos. At least we started watching the videos, but you really need to watch the whole thing to understand what you're doing. Said my piece. We only have like 9 more days of that after today anyways. As you know, all videos will disappear. So 1 times 1 is 1. 4 plus 1 is 5. 1 times 5 is 5. Negative 1 plus 5 is 4. 1 times 4 is 4. 16 plus 4 is 20. 1 times 20 is 20. Negative 20 plus 20 is 0. If you get anything other than a 0 here, you know that you did something wrong. Since we know that 1 is a root, then you would know that you did something wrong. So you need to go back and try again. There was a problem on the homework where somebody had written a 2 down here, and whoever else decided to copy off of them, I don't know who copied who, but there were 4 of you, who then ended up with a 2 here. The person forgot to write a negative 2 up here, which means that everybody then wrote a positive 2, and everyone came up with a 4 here instead of a 0, which would mean that you need to figure out what you did wrong or start over. However, I can't see everyone making that same mistake, so I don't really know how that could have occurred other than copying. See, I'm pretty good at this stuff. All right, now when I look at this, I have 4 terms here. So already knowing that I have 4 terms here tells me I need to keep going until I get down to 3 terms. So I'm going to draw my line in. I know that 5 was my other root. It was a negative 5 maybe. Let's just look at the graph to find out. Negative 5 was my other root that I had. So I can put a negative 5 in and start to divide. Now here I stop at the 20 because that's my last term. Bring down the 1. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 5. 5 minus 5 is 0. Negative 5 times 0 is 0. 4 plus 0 is 4. Negative 5 times 4 is negative 20. 20 minus 20 is 0. I got a 0 remainder, so I know that it's good. I'm down to 3 terms. I can stop with my synthetic division. Now I have x squared plus 4. And so now I can do my quadratic formula. Because I don't have a middle term here, I could just subtract the 4 over to the other side. It gives me x squared equals negative 4. Take the square root of both sides. You'll notice, by the way, that there is nothing for my 0. It's because it was 0x. 0 times anything becomes 0. So that's why it's just 1x squared plus 4. Take the square root of a negative. I can't do that unless it's an imaginary. It gives me plus or minus. Then let's break out our imaginary. Negative 1 times 4. Square root of a negative 1 is I. Square root of 4 is 2. So this would be plus or minus 2i. Since it's a plus and a minus, I have 2 of my roots. And then I should list them out all together. X equals 1, negative 5, and plus or minus 2i. I'll let you leave it as plus or minus. I can clearly see that there's 2 roots here, but you need to make sure that you put your plus and minus in there. All right, so that's essentially the same thing that we learned on Friday. Moving on, write the simplest functions with zeros at 2 plus I, square root of 3, and 1. So whenever I write this, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to write it out. The easiest way to write out the beginning is the fact that I have the x minus 1, x minus square root of 3, and then my 2 plus I is where it gets a little more complicated. Now, having my square root of 3 in here, I'm not going to want to multiply that either. So what I should actually do is look at this from a different perspective. So if we think about our rational root theorem and our conjugate root theorem, that tells us that we really have 5 roots here instead of 3. Think about the fact that we end up with all these plus or minuses. So this would be 2 plus I and 2 minus I. And that's going to be x minus this now, and x minus this. Just write it down below, I guess. Also have x plus root 3, because it would be a plus or minus root 3. We do x minus 2 plus I and x minus 2 minus I. So these are my 5 roots, so this must have a polynomial with degree 5. That comes from the fact that we had the complex conjugate and the rational conjugates as well. Anytime I end up with this square roots, I have to do a negative and a positive value. Same thing for my conjugates, end up with a negative and a positive value. Okay, the way that I'm going to handle this is I'm going to group these two together and really focus on that one. And then I'm going to group these two together as well. And then just kind of leave the x minus 1 off to its lonesome for now. So if I think about multiplying these two out, x times x gives me x squared. If I do the outer, that's square root of 3 times x. Inner is negative root 3 times x. So those cancel out, as they always should. and then I have square root of 3, negative square root of 3 times the square root of 3. That gives me a minus 9. X minus 1 is still just hanging out in front. Now let's go back to here. So x times x gives me x squared. Now if I do the outer, that's going to give me x times 2 minus I. The inner gives me x times 2 plus I. So those are going to multiply out to give us something a little different here. So if I do 2 times x, it gives me plus 2x. And then negative I times x, that's negative xi. Inside, I do 2 times x, and that gives me plus 2x. Then I do x times I, and that gives me positive xi. And then last is I times negative I, which is a negative I squared. So that last one is tough. But now we can simplify. I have negative xi plus xi. Those cancel out. 2x plus 2x is 4x. Then I squared is negative 1. It's minus a negative 1, so that's plus 1. And it's times x squared minus 9 times x minus 1. As if that wasn't all enough, now we have to distribute this stuff out as well. So I'm going to do it starting with these back two. X squared times x squared gives me x to the fourth. X squared times 4x gives me plus 4x to the third. X squared times 1 gives me x squared. Now multiply the negative 9 times x squared. That gives me minus 9x squared. Negative 9 times 4x will then give me negative 36x. And negative 9 times 1 gives me negative 9. Combine my like terms now. X to the fourth plus 4x cubed minus 8x squared minus 36x minus 9. And now I have to multiply that by x minus 1. So I'm going to distribute the x to each term. Just going right down the line. So x times x to the fourth, that's x to the fifth. X times 4x to the third gives me plus 4x to the fourth minus 8x to the third minus 36x squared minus 9x. And distribute the negative 1. That's negative x to the fourth minus 4x cubed plus 8x squared plus 36x plus 9. Combine my like terms. X to the fifth plus 3x to the fourth minus 12x to the third minus 28x squared plus 27x plus 9. And that is my final answer. That's really no fun, but it's what we have to do for this process. If you don't show me all these steps, there's going to be problems. I'm not giving you credit on your homework if you're not showing me all the steps. I need to see that you know what you're doing. Remember, you will be coming back to school here on March 15th for some of you. Other ones will choose to stay home, but that's up to them. But you need to get back into the groove of